These are the very first set of Oriveti IEMs that I'm reviewing, and they have left me quite impressed. Thank you to the folk at Headphone Zone for making this review possible by sending me this demo unit. All thoughts and opinions are my own. So let's jump straight into how this is built. These come with a very premium unboxing experience with a build to match. You get the IEMs in the box, a silver set of nozzles you can swap the black ones with, a genuine leather carry case with both the Oriveti and Headphone Zone branding on the lid. You get the cable in the box as well as a cleaning brush, a detachable 2.5mm and 4.4mm balanced plugs as well as a 3.5mm plug. And you get a whole 9 sets of ear tips to really customize a fit for yourself. 3 sets have a more rigid bore, the other 3 have a softer bore, and the last 3 sets are foam ear tips. The sound with each of these does change very slightly apart from them fitting differently, and it's a nice spread they've provided with these IEMs. These swappable plugs are very well built with a brushed metal finish, and they lock into the cable tightly enough for them not to pop out unless pulled intentionally. Moving on to the cable. It's a very neatly made copper braided 8-core oxygen free silver plated cable, and of course it's modular thanks to being able to swap your plugs on one end, and the other end is terminated to a 0.78mm connector for the IEMs. The middle of the cable has the same finish as the plugs, and this cable doesn't feature a microphone, so your device's microphone should take over for call and while you game. The loops on the cable are the perfect amount of tight. They hug the back of my ears without tugging too tightly and don't cause any discomfort. Moving on to the IEMs. These are made from an aircraft grade aluminium alloy and are CNC milled to get very specific contours. The nozzles can be swapped with the silver ones provided in the box if you want a slightly different sound from these, and have a grip on them so it's easy to screw and unscrew them for whenever you want to do this. You'll notice a venting port very close to the front of these IEMs, and there's another one near the 2-pin connectors. These venting ports help the sound breathe, so to say, which does help with the overall tuning of these IEMs. These have a very smart looking faceplate, and it's very easy to not notice the Headphone Zone branding on the right IEM because of how similar it looks to the Oriveti one on the left, and the finish is very professionally done. Upon my first glance at these IEMs, I did think they'd be very uncomfortable with this protruding section at the back, but I must say they're quite comfortable over prolonged periods of time. Wearing them when it's cool takes a little getting used to since they are cold to the touch thanks to having an aluminium housing. But once you've figured out which ear tips suit you best, these can be in your ear for a while without any discomfort or pain. These come with 9.8mm beryllium coated dynamic drivers, have a frequency response of 20 Hz all the way up to 20,000 Hz, and have a very easy to drive low resistance of just 16 ohms. On a volume front, I've been listening to this largely at about 25% volume. It's very comfortable over there. At about 35 to 40% is where I find this to get a little too loud for me. So if you do intend on preserving your hearing, I wouldn't recommend listening to these beyond 40% over prolonged periods of time. And like with all audio equipment, it does thin out at lower volumes, but I find that it does stay kind of rounded enough even at about 15% volume when you're winding down at the end of the day. When it comes to its soundstage, it is actually quite impressive because it is a bit wider than most IEMs that I have heard, and it doesn't only sit across a horizontal plane, but it does have a little bit of vertical stage as well. So I wouldn't say it goes too high, but I'd say maybe it sits around eyebrow level, sometimes a little higher than that above your ears in that plane. And of course it does have good left and right separation with a dead center phantom channel as well. And I think that stage that exists within this is thanks to those venting ports that Oriveti has made with these, because it definitely does give you a more natural sense of things, giving you coming from a much wider space. When it comes to its imaging, it is crisp and tight. In fact, I think when it comes to this price range, this is where you start stepping into the actual audiophile territory instead of the more affordable IEMs in lower price brackets. So over here is where you start getting more nuance, more details in your overall music. Things just tend to sound a lot more natural, a lot truer. They're not overly done in certain areas to give you a sense of over sharpness and so on. But overall, if you really do want better nuance and details, these do a very good job. When it comes to its timbre, I think these do a very good job of getting you close to the real thing. Now, I haven't liked using the black nozzles because I think they accentuate some frequencies that I can find a little bit fatiguing. So I have been testing these on the silver nozzles, and they do get a little more supple, a little truer, a little more musical, so to say. So especially when it comes to instruments, it does sound a lot more natural than with digital stuff. And of course, we know digital stuff is not as true as natural instruments. So this does do a good job of getting close to being as truthful as it can, of course. High frequencies have a soft, subtle delivery with a little bit of enthusiasm, and it carries over with good detail to you. This range isn't boosted to impress you. It's tuned to carry itself with a sense of grace with a good level of confidence. Percussive instruments, strings and cymbals here have a sense of purpose and have a clean delivery. Reverb and echo in the higher range also carries itself well, with decay fading out gradually instead of just going dead in a short period of time. This range has the right amount of boost without causing any sense of fatigue even over longer listening sessions. Listening to Hysteria performed by Def Leppard, these IEMs do a great job of bringing a sense of nostalgia to the surface, and the highs with this track come through with a sense of softness this track usually doesn't carry. It's usually over accentuated and can be a tedious listen, but not with these IEMs. If at any point you find the highs to be a little too much for you, you can always throw the black nozzles onto these IEMs, which does cull them ever so slightly. Mid frequencies maintain a rounded presentation but can get a little bit on the sibilant side with the black nozzles. This is why I have preferred using the silver nozzles. The silver nozzles do a great job of keeping the upper mids a little better controlled, especially if you listen to a lot of music from the 80s. This range does have a thinned out lower mid range, but at the same time you don't lose much depth with male and female vocals, so these do have a good sense of sounding more natural here. These have great instrument and vocal separation in this range, whether you listen to lighter music or even if your track gets busy. This of course depends on whether you're listening to a good recording or not, since these do have a good level of transparency when it comes to the source as well as the hardware you connect to. Listening to Dreams performed by Fleetwood Mac, I've heard Stevie Nicks' voice get thin with some IEMs or wireless earphones here because of a lower mid recess in tuning, but these IEMs manage to carry over a roundedness in her vocals, which is always the way to enjoy this track. The separation between her voice and the seconds is immaculate in this range, which will allow you to focus in on different vocal tracks if you're into that. Low frequencies are surprisingly large and full sounding, despite this set of IEMs having only the one dynamic driver, when a lot of other manufacturers are moving towards having multiple drivers in one IEM. There's a weight here I wasn't expecting these to carry, and must say that this has matured over many hours of burn-in and listening time. It was thinner sounding straight out of the box for certain. This range has become a little more prominent, mature and confident in the lower frequencies with the silver nozzles, and it's a good amount of weight for multiple genres of music. Jazz, blues and classical sound just right with this nozzle, but if at any point it gets too much for you, you can always throw on the black nozzles for a slightly reduced lower range. Listening to Zedd and John Mayer perform Automatic Yes, this lower range really does top off this song, so to say. It does carry a good amount of fun in this track, since it can carry a good amount of depth here, which is tight and well structured. These don't lean over to even looking over at sounding bloated. They've got more mid-bass accentuation and not as much sub-bass prominence, so if you're into electronic dance music, these may not be for you, but they sure make this track sound fun since there's a good balance of bass here. So to sum up, overall on a build front, I think these are put together very well. In fact, I can't believe that it's being sold at the price that it's being sold at, because it definitely is at least twice the value. Just looking at the unboxing experience and the overall materials that are made and how they've done it, even the little cutouts for venting that they've got on the IEMs is just beautifully done. And I really like the designs on the IEM faceplate itself. In fact, when I first unboxed it, I didn't notice that the Headphone Zone branding was on it until I noticed it a little bit later. So it's very cool that they look kind of similar. The cable, of course, is very nicely done. It is a very high quality braided cable, of course, but what catches your eye more than anything else are those plugs and the center section of the cable. It's beautifully finished. It's got this kind of sort of brushed metal look, and it definitely looks way more premium than these IEMs are when it comes to their price range. And of course, the way it plugs in, there's no sort of confident click into it. It doesn't click into place and you unclick it, but you know when it's locked in and when it is sort of held in pretty tightly. And even when you handle it, it's not going to pop out easily. On a comfort front as well, I did think it wouldn't fit well, because I've never really worn an IEM with this sort of weird protrusion at the back within the concha, but this actually does sit very comfortably. I've not had any discomfort. I've not had any pain. Usually I do face that with my left ear, since I have a smaller left concha, with some wireless earphones, with some IEMs, but I've heard this for hours on end and it's just sat very comfortably. In fact, even that the ear loop around the ear with the cable, it does hug, firmly, not tightly really, but it is very comfortable, and comfort wise I've not had any issues with these at all. When it comes to its sound, well, to be very honest, I did listen to these very briefly when I first took them out of the box, and they were very evidently calling for a burn-in. Now you may or may not lean towards burning stuff in, you might think it's snake oil, but I urge you to try burning in high-end equipment yourself and decide for yourself. Instead of reading other people's reviews and opinions, make this decision for yourself. But I did do about a 24-hour burn-in, and it did open up over the burn-in process, and as well while I was listening to these IEMs over time. Now, one thing I did definitely realize is that this is where you step into the audiophile territory. This is where you start really absorbing and understanding how much cleaner and more detailed IEMs can get in this price range onward. The stuff before this, I think, it's good. It's not that it's bad, it's good, but here's where you learn what trueness is. Here's where you actually see what timber can be instead of, a lot more affordable stuff. And now the thing is, when it did come to the original nozzles that it had on, the black ones, I mean, those I think can work for certain genres of music. I think that can work for some instrument stuff, some classical stuff. But for vocals, I didn't like those at all. I prefer the silver nozzles because those are much easier on the pops, clicks, T's, S's, sibilants. It's much easier going with that nozzle in particular. But overall, the mids are smooth, the highs are also, well, they're subtle, but they are well defined. They are not going to pierce your ear. The mids are nice and rounded, they're not thinned out, and they don't sound like the vocalist has a cold like I do right now. And the bass is surprisingly, it is confident, it is big, it is large. I definitely wasn't expecting it to sound this big, especially when I first unboxed it. It sounded a lot thinner, but it seems to have developed some sense of maturity. It is bigger, it is a bit tighter sounding than other IEMs that I have reviewed. There is a weight to it that is enjoyable, even with heavier music, which I found quite interesting. And I find it quite amazing that Oriveti has got, those venting ports, and they've tuned it in such a way where you do get a more expansive stage. It is, of course, quite impressive that it does sound as expansive as it does for a set of IEM. So, I mean, kudos to Oriveti for doing what they've done when it comes to the overall tuning of these. These are definitely a very good sounding set of IEMs, and they look very cool. I do like the overall finish. They do look very executive. And of course, when it comes to the price, I think they are super value for money. So, speaking about the price, well, at the time of recording this video, these do have a maximum retail price of 19,999, and very honestly speaking, I think they need to be sold at this price. But the current selling price as of right now is 9,999 rupees. That's a huge, I mean, it's a very good deal for these. And of course, you can, buy these abroad as well. And of course, if you do want to buy these, I will leave the links down below if you would like to. And overall, I think this is super value for money. The fact that you're getting something that sounds as good as this, I have heard a whole bunch of IEMs, but a lot of them don't have the expanse that I like from headphones. Like, I like open back headphones a lot. But this one does have a more expansive stage than most other IEMs that I've listened to. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I'd say this is great for music, gaming. I mean, yeah, you're minus the microphone, but your phone's microphone, or I'm sure you have a setup that has a microphone. If you do want to use this for gaming, it will be a lot more immersive with these IEMs in particular. And overall, I'd say they are super value for money. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative, and I do hope that I've helped you make some sort of purchase decision. If you would like to help support the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.